Well, panel, I learned a new term this week, mask harassment. It's a new provision in the proposed state budget making it a misdemeanor to wear a mask while committing a crime. Its genesis comes from the governor's concern that people hide their faces while committing anti-Semitic acts. Tara, is this new charge necessary?
Not that I can see that it is. Now, don't get me wrong. Obviously, we all know that anti-Semitism is on the rise, but I have yet to see any numbers, any data that says that many of these individuals that are committing these anti-Semitic acts are actually wearing masks. Where you do see masks being worn are at protests against the war, in Gaza. And many of those people purposely wear masks because they say, they're afraid they'll lose their jobs. Some of them are afraid that ICE will come after them. And there doesn't seem to be a clear connection between wearing the mask and actually committing an anti-Semitic act. And that's why I say I'm not sure that this is necessary.
So initially it was the idea was that, the masks should not be allowed for protests and stuff. So there was a huge furor against that. Because of course, after all, it's a First Amendment right. I mean, you are protesting, you can wear a mask. So this is only for Class A misdemeanor and above. So in case if you are harassing someone, if you are trying to beat someone up, you're trying to be violent towards someone, that's when this particular mask law kicks in, not for, non-violent protests. And I do think, slapping on another misdemeanor charge to a person who is being, harassing someone and so on, I don't think it is unjust. I think it's fair enough, right? Like, that's a kind of, if in some ways it discourages people to do that. But on the whole, wearing a mask for protest, I agree with that. And in some cases, we see security, right? Police and all, they all are in masks, and we don't know who is beating whom up on the streets. So should we also demand that the security officers, the police officers, show their faces also? So there is a point there. But I don't think this particular instance, if you're committing a Class A misdemeanor, you shouldn't wear a mask. I think it's fair. I don't know.
Fair, but what is the problem that's actually being solved here? I mean, the governor says, right, quote, what people are looking for is to not have someone be able to get away with wearing a mask while they're committing a crime, and that's just not true. I mean, what people are looking for is crime prevention, and as you said, all this law does is add a little bit of a misdemeanor to an existing crime, and so do you really think that it's going to work as a preventative device where people are going to say, I was going to commit a crime with a mask, but now that I got this extra misdemeanor, I'm not going to do it. Right. It's silly.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that to some extent.
But Ben, identification is really important. You know that as a former police officer.
Absolutely. It's an aggravating factor, and I think it should be there. I think it's a no-brainer. Many states have something like this, like a resist, obstruct, and delay an investigation, and that's exactly what this is doing. If you're committing a crime and you're wearing a mask, you should get the additional charge. I think it's straightforward.
So it's not silly.
No, I think it is, and I think actually some of the arguments about this case are silly. So you got supporters who are contending that mask bans are helpful for quickly identifying criminals, and then you have the opponents who will say that no, such measures are unnecessary because masks can't fool facial recognition software, and so the mask bans are, you said, they're just an impediment to free speech for people who want to protect their identities or hide their identities. But that counter-argument is contradictory, too, because if those masks can't fool facial identification software, then the people are already identifiable readily. And so those masks don't affect free speech. And so the whole thing strikes me as silly, fundamentally.
Well, it's silly if you look at it as it being preventative. I agree. People aren't going to go, oh, well, now I can't wear a mask, so I'm not going to commit the crime. They're still going to wear the mask and commit the crime. But from an investigative standpoint, it is more effective and quick to get somebody that's committing crimes, trying to hide their identity, and also show the court that the aggravating factor is that they were trying to they didn't just make a mistake, they just didn't walk in and rob the store by whim, they also premeditated by wearing a mask. So it is an aggravating factor. I do think it's a good thing to have on the books. And, it's not like they're saying, if you wear a mask, it's against the law. It's you're committing a crime and you're trying to hide your identity. So from an investigative standpoint, definitely not silly.
But that sort of gets back to where I started. If the whole purpose of reinstituting, because we did have this ban for many years in New York, reinstituting this mask ban, if the whole purpose is to prevent people who are in the act of committing a crime, and the focus is on anti-Semitism, and let's remember that has been the focus of the governor, that has been the focus of in both houses of the assembly, basically saying this is going to prevent people who are harassing Jewish citizens, who are protesting and committing crimes. So that has been the focus of this. Then you get back to the fact that, is this really going to prevent anti-Semitism, which is the connection that has been made by those who propose it. So I agree with you. If we were just talking about crime in general, this would make more sense. But the whole focus of this has been on the anti-Semitic nature of these crimes, the vandalism, the harassing of Jewish people, et cetera.
And it mainly stemmed out of the subway situation, right? That's where it became the issue.
In New York City.
New York City subway. And again, this is also part of the broader discussion which we have. Our budget was supposed to be coming out on April 1st, and we have been appropriately fooled. The budget is still not out, and we don't know why. And this was part of that negotiating technique. But, there are other things that Hokul is worried about in terms of crime, and maybe she will be hammered in terms of crime when it comes to the election, because although crime rates are down. So I think this was one of the ways to kind of appease that crowd, that she's being kind of tough on crime and so on. And not only against Jewish people, right? I mean, it has been against Arabs and Palestinians. I mean, the Palestinian guy who was a kid who was stabbed by his landlord is a recent trial that came out. So, we always talk about anti-Semitism, but I also want to put on record that we should also add anti-Arab, anti-Muslim hatred that is also very, very prevalent. But that's beside the point here.
Chad, there's been some murkiness about what is anti-Semitic, and I'm wondering if you have any concerns about who's going to get charged for the original incident and then have the mask crime put on top of that.
No, I mean, when I read the articles about this and look at the rhetoric, I think a lot of it is being fueled by sort of emotional appeals to pump up support for the opposition, as opposed to some sort of data-driven kind of analysis. I think that, again, if we think about like facial recognition software, we know from 2 years ago that software misidentifies black faces at a much higher rate than it does for white faces. And those are the systems we'd be relying upon in the absence of these mask bans. And, I can think of some pretty cowardly organizations that wear masks and they're terrorizing of minorities, in general. So, no, I don't really buy this argument that the opposition is putting forth.